There was a man in recorded history who commanded the loyalty of armies, the obedience of millions, and the respect of the most powerful people on earth. He did not achieve it through charm. He did not achieve it by trying to be liked. He did not achieve it by asking for permission. He achieved it by becoming completely, unmistakably himself and never apologizing for it. His name was Marcus Aurelius, and the most remarkable thing about him was not his power. It was this. In the private writings he never intended anyone else to read, he did not obsess over conquest, status, or glory. He wrote about something far more difficult: the daily, quiet, ruthless discipline of governing himself. That is the part nobody tells you. The world does not hand you worth. It reads your worth from you, from the signals your behavior sends every single day. And whether you realize it or not, you are always broadcasting something. The question is, what are you broadcasting? Most people broadcast apology. They broadcast doubt. They broadcast, "Please accept me. Please don't reject me. Please be comfortable with what I just said." And the people around them, their friends, co-workers, partners, even strangers, receive that signal exactly as it was sent. They respond accordingly. They treat them like people who must constantly earn their place. But there is another signal. It is not arrogance. It is not performance. It is not noise. It is something older, quieter, and far more powerful. The Stoics had a word for it: dignitas. There is no perfect English equivalent, because modern culture has almost forgotten the reality it describes. Dignitas is not self-esteem. It is not how highly you rate yourself in your own mind. It is how you carry yourself. It is the structure of your behavior. It is the visible shape of your private standards. It is built from 1,000 small choices made when no one is watching and recognized by everyone when they are. Today, we are going to examine that structure. 7 laws. Not suggestions, not productivity tips. Laws, because whether you understand them or not, they are already operating. Violate them, and you teach the world to undervalue you. Honor them, and you teach the world something it does not forget. And the 7th law is the one that changes how you move through every room for the rest of your life. Law 1. The law of internal authority. Your worth is established in private before it is ever recognized in public. Before Marcus Aurelius became emperor, he spent years preparing not for applause, not for status, not for appearance, but for self-command. He studied. He reflected. He trained his mind the way a soldier trains his body. Not to impress anyone, but because to live with an ungoverned mind was to him a kind of defeat. So when power finally came, it did not create him. It revealed him. That is the law. Authority over others is impossible without authority over yourself. And authority over yourself is impossible without a private history of kept promises. This goes deeper than discipline. Most people think discipline is public. They think of it as intensity, image, grind, performance. But the Stoics understood something more exact. Every time you make a private commitment to yourself and break it, you do not just fail at a task. You weaken the trust between you and yourself. And that damage accumulates. A person who repeatedly breaks small promises does not merely become inconsistent. They become internally divided. They stop believing their own word. And once that happens, it shows. It shows in hesitation. It shows in the need for reassurance. It shows in the urge to seek approval before taking action. It shows in the way confidence collapses the moment someone questions them. Because when self-trust is bankrupt, external validation becomes a survival mechanism. Epictetus understood this better than most. He was born enslaved. He had no guaranteed freedom, no security, no status. And yet, by all accounts, he became one of the most unshakable human beings of his age. Why? Because he mastered the one domain no one could take from him: his own choices, his own judgments, his own inner rule. He taught, make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it comes. That sounds simple. It is not. It requires you to stop seeing life as a series of things happening to you and start seeing it as a series of choices being made by you. This law is uncomfortable because it forces honesty. Sometimes the reason people do not take you seriously is not that they have failed to see your worth. It is that your private behavior has trained you not to believe in it yourself. You said you would change. You didn't. You said you would stop tolerating that. You still are. You made commitments at the beginning of the year that have already been abandoned. No one else may know that, but they can feel the result of it. They can feel when a person's inner life is out of alignment with their outer words. So the first law does not demand perfection. It demands congruence. Close the gap between what you say and what you do. Slowly, quietly, without drama. Keep one promise, then another, until your private record becomes something you can actually stand on. That is where worth begins. Not in presentation, not in branding, not in performance. In who you are when the door is closed, no one is watching, and the choice is entirely yours. Law 2. The Law of Deliberate Scarcity. What is given carelessly is rarely valued. There is a principle that runs through Stoicism, economics, and nature itself. Value is inseparable from scarcity. Not because scarcity is manipulation, but because it signals meaning. It tells the world this is not available everywhere. This is not handed out without thought. Most people give themselves away recklessly. They are always available. They reply instantly. They hand out their attention, energy, time, and emotional presence to anyone who reaches for it. And then they wonder why no one treats them as precious. If you are available, then they wonder why no one treats them as precious. To everyone at all times, then your presence loses weight. Not because you are worthless, but because you have removed all boundaries around what you offer. This is not about becoming cold. It is not about playing hard to get. It is about recognizing that your full presence is finite, and anything finite must be governed. Think about the people whose presence actually carries weight. Not the loudest people, the ones whose words land, the ones whose attention means something. What do they have in common? They are not endlessly accessible. They do not react to every invitation. They do not pour themselves into every room. They do not speak simply to remain visible. Their presence has force because it is directed. That is what deliberate scarcity means. Not withholding. Direction, it means giving your time and energy where it is deserved and protecting it where it is not. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, yet still protected space for thought, reflection, and inner discipline. In the middle of one of the most demanding lives imaginable, he still guarded his interior world. That is the question for you. What are you protecting? Or have you made yourself so available to everyone that there is nothing left of you by the end of the day? Govern your presence like the scarce resource it is. Because every time you make yourself cheaply available, you teach people how cheaply to value you. Law 3. The Law of Unborrowed Justification. You do not owe the world endless explanations for your decisions. One of the most common forms of weakness in modern life is over-explaining. You say no and then spend 3 minutes softening it. You make a decision and then bury it under apology, reassurance, and justification. You draw a boundary and then rush to explain why you are still a good person for having one. This behavior is so common that most people do not even notice they are doing it. But beneath it lies something important, a lack of internal permission. Over-explaining is rarely about clarity. It is usually about approval. It is an attempt to make your decision acceptable to someone else before you allow yourself to feel secure in it. In other words, you are borrowing permission to stand by your own choices. The Stoics would have called this a failure of the ruling faculty, the part of the mind meant to govern action through reason rather than fear. Because when your decisions are aligned with your values, they do not need theatrical defense. A simple sentence often carries more authority than a paragraph. I won't be able to make it. I've decided not to continue. That doesn't work for me. Complete sentences. Not hostile, not dramatic, just whole. When you over-explain, you unintentionally communicate three things. I do not fully trust this decision. Your comfort matters more to me than my clarity. If you push hard enough, I may fold. And people respond to that signal. Not because they are evil, because they are responsive. They test what appears negotiable. So pay attention to where you over-explain. Those places reveal where self-trust is still weak. The goal is not to become cold. The goal is to become clean, to let your decisions stand without needing applause to hold them up. Law 4. The law of stillness under pressure. Composure is not passivity. It is power. When crisis struck Rome, Marcus Aurelius became known not for panic, rage, or theatrics, but for deliberation. He received bad news, gathered the facts, consulted wisely, and acted. He responded. He did not react. That distinction changes everything. Reaction means the moment has taken control of you. It means your state is being dictated by whatever just happened. If someone escalates, you escalate. If they become emotional, you become emotional. If they become irrational, you follow them there. Response is different. Response says, I see what happened, and I will meet it on terms I choose. That is what composure really is, not the absence of feeling, the presence of command. Marcus Aurelius wrote, You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. He was not saying suppress emotion. He was saying this, events are not your response. There is a space between what happens and what you do next, and within that space lives your character. When people see that you can be provoked instantly, they learn something about you, that you can be controlled. When they see that you can remain measured under pressure, they learn something else, that your inner life is not available for hijacking. That signal matters. The person who cannot be easily rattled communicates depth. Stability, authority. So build the pause. Not the fake theatrical pause, the real one. The one where you ask, what does this moment require of me? Not what does it trigger in me? Not what do I want to discharge right now? What does it require? That question is one of the purest forms of strength. Law 5. The law of occupied ground. Space you do not claim will be claimed by someone else. There are people who walk into a room and seem to shrink before anyone has spoken to them. They sit on the edge of the chair. Their voice trails off. Their body apologizes before their mouth does. They act as if taking up space requires a defense. This is not humility. Humility is accurate proportion. Shrinking is self-erasure. And the world reads the difference. When you hesitate mid-sentence, when you lower your voice for no reason, when your posture announces uncertainty, you are sending instructions to everyone around you about how to treat you. And most people, without cruelty or even awareness, follow those instructions. They interrupt. They talk over you. They discount what you say. Not always because they intend disrespect, but because your own signals have made your position feel negotiable. Your body is not separate from your worth. It broadcasts it. Your posture, your eye contact, your breathing, your pace, your willingness to finish a sentence and let it stand. These are not shallow things. They are the first language people perceive. So practice occupying your ground. Sit fully in the chair. Finish the thought. Speak at the volume the idea deserves. Look people in the eye. Stop moving as if your existence needs to be excused. You do not need to dominate the room. You only need to stop abandoning your place in it. Law 6. The law of clean endings. What has expired must be released. Few things destroy self-respect more quietly than staying too long in what has already ended. A relationship that has turned into obligation. A friendship sustained only by history. A role you have outgrown. an environment that requires you to betray your own standards just to remain included. When you stay in what consistently diminishes you, you send a message. You say, "My presence does not need to be earned." You say, "I will remain even when my value is not reciprocated." You say, "I am willing to absorb disrespect rather than face the fear of leaving." And people learn from that. Again, not always consciously, but they learn. They learn that you can be taken for granted. They learn that you will remain available past the point of fairness. They learn that the cost of mishandling your presence is low, and what cannot be lost is rarely treasured. This is why the ability to end things cleanly is such a powerful signal of self-worth, not with rage, not with spectacle, not with revenge, with clarity. The Stoics did not teach attachment at any cost. They taught alignment. They taught that nothing external, no position, no role, no relationship should be preserved at the expense of your integrity. Sometimes strength looks like staying. Sometimes strength looks like leaving. Wisdom is knowing which is which. You do not owe everyone a dramatic speech. Sometimes a clean ending is quiet. A step back. A shorter conversation. A boundary held without performance. A private decision. This is no longer mine to carry. End what has ended. Because your presence is not a burden to distribute wherever it is demanded. It is a gift. And gifts given without discernment stop being gifts. Law 7. The Law of the Unreadable Interior. The most powerful thing you can carry is a self that cannot be fully exhausted by other people's understanding. Human beings are drawn to depth. Not fake mystery. Not performative distance. Not cryptic behavior dressed up as significance. Real depth. The kind that reveals itself slowly. The kind that cannot be summed up in one conversation. The kind that makes people feel there is more there than surface access can reach. The opposite is the person who empties themselves immediately. They explain everything, disclose everything, justify everything, reveal every insecurity, every opinion, every emotional fluctuation on first contact. And once fully mapped, they become ordinary. Marcus Aurelius wrote often about the inner citadel, the part of the self that must remain governed, protected, and not handed over to every external force. That image matters, because people can feel when someone has an interior life. They can feel the difference between a person who has cultivated depth and a person who is made entirely of reaction. The person with a real interior is harder to destabilize, harder to provoke, harder to define too quickly, less desperate to be understood, less eager to perform themselves into acceptance. This is not secrecy. It is substance. It means having thoughts you have actually thought through before speaking them. It means holding some part of yourself outside the marketplace of instant approval. It means becoming someone whose silence is not empty, but occupied. That is where the other 6 laws lead. Keep your private promises, and you build an interior worth respecting. Govern your presence, and you stop scattering yourself. Stop over-explaining, and you stop handing out your center. Stay composed under pressure, and you prove your inner world is not owned by circumstance. Occupy your ground, and you allow that inner world to take visible form. Release what has expired, and you protect what remains. All of it leads here, to becoming a person who is not performing depth, but living from it. A person whose words carry weight because they are backed by a seriously lived private life. A person whose stillness is not emptiness, but command. A person whose worth does not need to be announced because it can be felt. That is the deepest signal of value there is. Not what you claim, not what you display, what you actually are when no one is looking. That is what people respond to. That is what commands respect. That is what cannot be faked. 7 laws. None of them require a new personality. None of them require reinvention. All of them are available now. Not after some dramatic transformation. not after your life changes. Now, that is what makes this difficult. And that is what makes it hopeful. The Stoics never promised an easy life. They promised something better: sovereignty. Sovereignty over your choices, over your responses, over the signal you send the world about what you are worth. And once that signal becomes clear, consistent, and lived long enough, the world begins to read it correctly. So do not try to master all seven at once. Choose one. Begin today. Practice it until it stops feeling like practice, until it becomes the way you move, the way you speak, the way you decide, the way you remain. The rest will follow. They always do. Walk steady.